architecture. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go reverse actually. So what I'm going to do is that we will first discuss what is an RDD, then we'll discuss what makes RDD important, but then we'll ask why RDD is like that. Why they have chosen those interesting topics or the concept in order to have that RDD in that way. So that you can correlate these, and also these ideas are not restricted to Spark. If you understand these ideas, you can use in normal day-to-day programming also. Okay, let us start. Now in Spark, you have to remember only one thing, that is RDD, which stands for Resilient Distributed Data Set. Resilient means fault tolerant, distributed means it can run on multiple machines, data set means everyone knows, it's a collection of data. But what is the biggest thing is that it's a big collection of data, but having these four important properties: immutable, lazily evaluated, cacheable, and type inferred. How many of you heard all these four words before? How many of you heard immutable? Okay. Lazily evaluated? Okay, few. Cacheable, everyone knows. Type inferred? Okay, few. So let us start. What is immutable? People say immutable is something not changes. But I say in the world there is only one constant: change. Right? So immutability is defined as once it is created, it is not going to change. Okay? Once you created it, it is not going to change. So don't think it is a constant, because it has to be created at some point of time. Now in these concepts we are going to talk about normal programming. I am not going to talk about RDD, because immutability do not come from RDD. It comes from very long back. Lot of places we have immutability. In Java we have immutability. Can you give an example? Strings. So we have immutability. Now big data by default immutable in nature. This is one of the things. If you use HDFS, it is immutable by default. You can only do appends. You cannot do updates. The reason is that no one wants to update 4 terabytes of file. Right? No one says, okay, let me go to 25th line of 4 terabyte file and I'll update something. Not really. Right? So big data by default immutable in nature. Now the question is, why we need immutability? The first thing is that if you are immutable, you get parallelization free. You don't have to do anything, because if you done multi-threading, what is the biggest pain? Locking. Right? All your locking semaphores, because your underneath data is mutable. If you are immutable, you don't have to do locking, because underneath data is never going to change. The second thing is that if you have immutability, you can cache, right? What is the biggest problem in caching? What happens when there is a updation in the underneath data? If you are immutable, you can cache forever. Right. Now let us go to some examples of immutability. Yeah. So that we can see how it happens. I think everyone can read some programming language, and this programming language can be anything, because almost everyone copies C. Right. So any language you think it is fine. Const int a equal to 0. This is how we do immutability. In most of the languages, immutability is something special. You have to ask for it. Otherwise, by default, you get mutability. Everyone agrees with this? So you get int b equal to 0 is mutable. You may be saying, and drop the semicolon, don't worry about semicolons. Right? How you do updations? When I say b++, it is an in-place update. All agrees with that? Now when I say a+1, a is not going to change, only we are going to have another result. Now one more thing normally people can even do is that a equal to a+1 in object-oriented programming. The reason is that immutability is about value, not about reference. Okay, this is very important. Here, what I mean by is that if you recreate the reference, then it is not something to do with immutability. It's like recreating a file with a new content, with the same name. You cannot, that's immutable. But you cannot update the existing things. All are able to follow? It's about value, not about the reference. Because in some of the example we'll see, we can reassign the RDDs. The reason is that we are just throwing away the existing one, recreating new one with the same name. But it does not mean that they are just updated. All are able to follow? Okay, but no one does single value, right? Which are big data sets, which should be a collection. Let us see what happens in collection. I am hoping all are able to read from there also. Okay. We have a collection. Now I have changed my syntax. Just for a comparison, var means mutable, val means immutable. The reason is that this comes from Scala, but you don't have to worry about it. And this is not even correct Scala syntax. Okay, so don't worry about the syntax. Everyone understand what's going on? There are two collections. One is immutable, one is mutable. Now what I want is that I want to update the collection. Let us say I want to add one. How I do in normal programming? I write a for loop and I update. Everyone agrees? But in immutability, there is no way to update like that because the underneath collection cannot change. I am inventing new function called the map which does this. Now if you done Python or something else, it is obvious to you what I am trying to do. But I will give you what I am trying to do. What is normally name map means? Take one value, map it to something else. So if you done graph theory, some point of time, you have these two sets, and if you are having a function, you are mapping from one set to another set. Right? It's very, very mathematical, but if you are seeing, don't think map as a hash map. Nothing to do with it. Here mapping means take input value, map it to something else. So here what I am taking? I am taking each value, mapping to a new value called value plus 1, but these two collections are different. Everyone's able to follow till here, right? It's very simple. And what we do, this is called as not looping, we call this as transformations, which means we transform one collection to another collection. This just for a nomenclature. Okay, we have a new copy, everyone is happy. Now the problem is not with this. What happens if we have multiple transformations? And we want to do multiple updates, not only once. Think that these two comes in like, first is coming in the second line, next one is coming in the 128th line. These two updates. So what I want to do, first I want to add 1, then I want to add 2. You may say, why I am not adding 3? Because they are not nearby. They may be somewhere else. Now here what happens, how many collection I end up with? Only one collection because I am updating the same collection. But here what happens? I end up with 3 copies of the data because of the immutability. Everyone is able to follow? Simple enough? Okay. Now, immutability is great for parallelism, but it has its own challenges. What is the challenge? First is multiple copies of data sitting around, right? Because whenever we do transformation, I am getting a new copy, then I am in the problem. But more importantly, I am going across the data again and again. Because first time I went across 4 elements, again I went across 4 new elements, but I am going multiple times. Now if you have multiple copies and multiple passes in big data, that is an issue, correct? In big data, let us say I have 1 terabyte. Having like 3 terabytes just for computation, it's just waste of time, sorry, waste of space. And also if you are going across 1 terabyte 3 times, just to do 3 transformations, you are wasting a lot of CPU cycles. So which means I want immutability because it's great for parallelism, but it has its own cost. But we can be smart. So one of the example I used to give for people is, okay, how many of you here are lazy by default? Okay, some may agree and some may say, no. By default I am not lazy, but most of the time I am. Right, so I will give an example. So what I do is that, okay, let us say it is a Sunday, that's when most of people are lazy. Maybe your wife or husband, you can switch between, is that they come to you in the morning and say, you have to get something from the shop. And you know, this World Cup is in the mornings, right? You say, okay, we had something, maybe we will get. Maybe after, in the lunch time, they say, oh, you already had one, right? Add one more. So when you go, you can get one more. They say, okay, fine. But you only get alerted when they say, where are those things? Whatever I asked for in the evening maybe, where are those things? And match is over, you see even the highlights. They say, okay, now I will combine all this, whatever you asked for. Even I forgot, I will even go ask, what actually you told? Take a list, go out and take everything. Rather than going 3 times, I go only 1 time. That's what makes humans more powerful than all other animals. Right? We invented all technology so that we can be more lazy. Right? That's a very good nature to have. So if you are lazy, don't be sad. Right? So let's get lazy. So what we here saying that laziness means don't compute transformations till you need it. So if you are a student, you can say like this, I know there is an exam after 1 month, but I am not worried because my mind can only store information for 10 hours. So what I do, before night, I remember all the things what need to be remembered, then in the next 10 hours I'll use it, then I can forget easily. Which means even though transformations are needed, even like 1 month back, everything is announced, I say, no problem. I know that, but I don't have to do anything. Now, laziness differs evaluation. This is very important. In normal programming, when you execute something, everything evaluates. But laziness means you may be executed, but you have not done anything for it. So we'll see examples. So there is a separation between execution and evaluation. So you know what is execution? CPU seen that instruction, but evaluation means you've done some processing. Make sense? Why? Because we are lazy. Let us see some examples. Okay, here someone came and told me that add 1 to this collection. I said okay, but I have not done anything because they not asked for result, right? Say okay, I am happy. What I want to do? 1. Someone else have told you, okay, you already added 1, right? I say yeah, I done that. You add 2 also. They say okay, fine. I am not really doing anything. But someone after some time people can, where is that result C2? Right. So this is one example I used to give is that why we do have a bug tracker in companies. Because people never track actually what's happening till they ask for it. Right? You maybe a manager comes to you and say there is a bug. You say yeah, that's normal. Right? But if it is not assigned to you, you say okay. So same way. So when I ask for what happened to that bug, you say okay. Now I have to go and find out the code which is actually triggering it. I'm going to fix it. But you can be smart here. Since you are lazy, now you can combine. So what we are going to do is that these things going to be combined, which means I add 1 and add 2 in the same pass rather than doing multiple times. And since no one asked for C1, I am not going to even to create C1, which means I end up only having 2 copies rather than having 3 copies because someone came and asked me only C2 rather than asking for C1. So which means I can be smart to combine this transformation. So even if I have immutability, I don't have to have a penalty of performance. All are able to follow what I am trying to say here? Okay, now we'll see. If you can be only lazy if the underneath data is immutable. This is very important. If the exam going to change, if the exam subject changes, then you are in the big problem. Right? The timetable has to be constant. Then only you can plan like, okay, I will skip this, I will skip that. If the timetable changes, you are in problem. Same way, if the data is immutable, then you can say, okay, I'll wait for it. Because let us think that if it is not immutable, then what happens? Maybe by the time you calculate it is something different altogether. This happens for a lot of companies, right? It is almost impossible to recreate a bug in databases. If the database says there is some state and you go to your UAT or test and try to recreate it, it's impossible. There is some issue in production which is triggered by the database, which is very difficult because there used to be one good talk from one of the things. He says, in whole universe, we have around some billions of atoms, whole known universe. We have more number of atoms in our computer chip because we have 128-bit chip, 2 to the power 128. Which means every computer can be there in completely new state, even if you have exact same configuration or same software. One of the examples he was giving was why people are not able to install Wi-Fi driver in Linux. Simplest is that maybe everything is same, but that step is not going to work for you because your configuration is something different. Which means in computer science or computer programming, the systems can be there in the different states, and sometimes it becomes impossible to reproduce things. But if you are immutable, you are not worried, right? Because you know that data is never going to change, which means this transformation can come and go any point of time. You are going to get same result, which means you can run this transformation 100 times, your result will be exactly same. Make sense? And also, one of the important thing is transformation should not have a side effect. Very important. If your transformation has side effect, then you cannot rerun. So which means this functional programming idea, the transformations or map or something, this will not allow you. And some people are smart, they will try to do that. Like, okay, let me update database in this one column only. You aren't going to be in problem. Don't do it. If the transformation is not going to have side effects, and if the underneath data is immutable, then you can be lazy. So you cannot just be lazy having your surrounding changing. Right? So the first important fact is you have to be immutable. Then you can layer laziness over it. Now here I want to point out one thing is that if you ever heard pure functional programming, they mean two things. They are immutable by default and they are lazy by default. This is the difference between normal functional programming and pure functional programming. Okay, just to have some people already know functional programming, just to give an idea. Okay, then so combining laziness and immutability gives better performance in distributed processing. Now to concentrate on MapReduce, MapReduce has immutability, but MapReduce miss the laziness. which means it runs whenever you ask for it. It never says, okay, no, I will wait till you ask for something else. When you run multiple jobs, it has to go through the data multiple times because do not have the laziness. Okay, next. Now, not everything is free, right? Laziness comes with its own challenges. If you ever try to debug laziness program, you will know what hard it is. Because nothing is computed, it's very difficult to say what's going on. Maybe something like nothing is happening. And if you ever use, so how many of you used Pig on Hadoop? So if you use Pig, you know, till you call store or collect, nothing going to happen. Same with Spark. People say, I done map everything like we see in the mailing list. Nothing is coming. Of course it doesn't come because everything is lazy. So if you are lazy, you have issues with the data types. Which means which data type to have where because you are not computing immediately. And even if there is an error, it's not going to be obvious because the execution happens after some time. But what we know is that compilers are much smarter these days. You do not have to write hash map string of string equal to new hash map string of string. Because if I'm already asking for string of string, it has to be string of string. That's why Java 7 gives this diamond operator, which we know, okay. But some compilers have gone to a level saying that you don't declare anything, we will figure it out for you. That is called as type inference. So this is not feature of Spark, this feature comes from the Scala, but that makes your life much more easier, which means they will figure it out type for you, even if it is lazy or not. Which means, why it is important? You don't want to get semantics error when you run on big data. So this is what happens in MapReduce. You get this error of key casting is not correct after running over 50 GB. Right? It should have given compilation error that I am sending an int writable and you are giving float writable. But it is not going to do. But in Spark, you are never going to get that kind of errors because it is type info and all the semantics errors you get at the time of compilation, not when you are running. Make sense? So let us see some examples. Let us see next. Okay, so here we have to start with some explicit data type. So here I am starting with the array. Then what we do is that every transformation, since it does not have a side effect, it has to say what is the data type it returns. So for example, map only can return array if it is doing on array. It cannot change the data type. Which means here while I am writing val is that the Scala compiler can know that C1 is array by just going through the source, which is not there in the Java kind of languages.
But the value can change, right?
Sorry? The content can change, the data type will not change. Same with the thing. Now here one of the example is that once it knows integer and if you are trying to do map on it, you will get a compilation error. Now this goes beyond in Spark API. If you see in the Spark API, there are a few functions only for key value pairs. If you try to call them on non-key value pairs, you will get a compilation error, which is what we want. Not like, okay, after running everything we say, okay, now we have a problem. What? You are casted your integer to string.
Python problem.
Right, okay, Python dynamic typing. So it looks like a dynamic typing, but it's actually static typing. So combination of, so we call it as a type inference. Most of the languages, I think the recent Lambda in Java 8, it is type info. So you don't have to give types in the Lambdas. Okay. Finally.
Not always.
Okay, not always, yeah. Caching. This, as I told you, this is a side effect. Since RDD is immutable by nature, you can cache it. And since RDD is laziness by default, you can recreate the result without asking for it. See, this is why I told you. The in-memory feature comes from the better APIs, not because it is created for in-memory. Since you are immutable, what you can do with it? You can cache for a long time. Since you are transformation only you are doing, if there is a failure in the one of the system, you can recreate because Spark can remember the lineage. So here lineage means this transformation can be remembered for a long time. It can say, oh, this C2 means I have to go to true transformation in order to recreate it. So Spark remembers your data, Spark also remembers your transformations. Now why it can remember? Because it can rerun because there are no side effects. Are you able to follow what I am trying to say? So this is a better design, not just better performance. Finally, transformation can be saved. This is called as a lineage in Spark. Caching data, of course, improves your engine performance. Right? If you are in the RAM, you are immediately fast. Now the question is, where these ideas came from? These ideas came from functional programming. So if you want to know more about these ideas, I encourage you to learn one of the functional programming, whichever you like. In our example, we are going to look at Scala for some level. But these ideas are not came from Spark. This is the reason why Spark is written in Scala also. Why they are not given go with the Java? The reason is that these things are not by default in Java. Make sense? So if you know these 4 ideas, then you know RDD. That's it. RDD means big collection of data with these 4 properties. Done. Okay. Now this is the architecture. Finally, I am going to come. In the left, you have input data coming from all kind of things. They have this Spark driver program. This Spark driver program is any main program of your normal Java or Scala. They have this scheduler. What this scheduler does is, it takes the transformation and runs on distributed computing. So that's it. It do not do much. But if you see here, it is not going to run on its own scheduler. Underneath, it uses Mesos and Yarn to actually do the distribution. In our hands-on, we are going to do a single node thing, which means everything is going to run on thing. But it is meant to be run on clusters. Why? Because it can plug and play to this Mesos, which means these are 3 different parts. The API is different, the scheduler is different, and the cluster management is different. In MapReduce, everything is same. Make sense? And this is where we stop at the architecture. There is like a lot more into the RDD and architecture. I think for introduction, this should be more than enough. And I'm already kind of running like late on the time. So what we do is that let us jump onto hands-on, because maybe some people even forgot we had a hands-on. So let us do some hands-on so that we feel it, we see it. But till here, all are able to follow the why we have Spark and what makes Spark special and what is the real abstraction of RDD. These ideas are important. And if you ever use any other language, if you never use Spark, you can use these ideas. If you want to create something distributable, go with immutability, go with laziness. Then you get a lot of things for free. And if you really want something better, go with the languages which will support them by default. So these 3 combinations allow you to do better software. Make sense? Okay. Now, okay, so we'll do like a half an hour hands-on, then we'll give it to other speakers. And if you are thinking of flash talks, we can have after that, but I'm not really know, like, do we have time? But I am hoping that people are enjoying the sessions. Right? All are able to follow. Now, all are able to install the Spark. Okay, let us start the Spark shell so that. What is openness here?
Just one question.
Yeah, sure.
We run Spark
Okay.
on a single node and get RED, which is parallelized.
Yeah.
Is it parallelized in nature?
Yeah, it is. It internally can use multi-cores.
Do we have to say?
No, it uses by default. So in the future, in the one of things, we can say local. That's 1 core. We can say local 5 in one of the parameters. Then it uses 5 cores if there is 5 cores.
And don't mention anything. It's local.
Yeah, by default it's local. If you say local, then it's 1 core. Okay. Now, yeah, start a Spark shell. So we start Spark shell like this. So one of the things, I never use Windows by normal. So I was thinking, does Spark runs on Windows? Then it runs on Windows, which is great, right? So if you are in Windows, the way you start is different. I only given like Spark shell.cmd. That's how I knew how to run on Windows. But if there are better ways to run, you can run. So, but ultimately, what you have to do is is that you have to get Scala's prompt. If you are in Scala prompt, then you are started a Spark shell. Now, let me tell over what is this shell. This is called as. Okay. I know what is that. Yeah, we'll fix it. We don't need for Scala. Say control it. Now, this is called as REPL. So if you are on Python, you know what is REPL. REPL means read, evaluate, print, loop. You read, evaluate, print, and loop. So that's the way. And it is very nice to do workshops with REPL, because you type in, you see things are going on, everyone is happy. Now what we do is that we start with Scala. Now I don't have a slide for Scala, but let me tell you very brief about what is Scala is. Scala, the names come from scalable. Okay, it is created by one of the person called Martin Odersky in one of the universities in 2004. He was the original author of Java Generics in 1998. So he was saying, okay, Java is not going anywhere, let me create something better. He created something called Pizza or something in between, a language, but then he started with Scala. Now Scala is a unique language in the programming language because it tries to combine function-oriented programming with object-oriented programming. So this is the biggest thing. I'm not going to go deeper into because I only want functional programming today. But if you want to have object-oriented, it is perfectly nice. And also, the biggest thing about Scala is it runs on JVM. So if you're already using Java or anything related to that, you can run Scala, and whatever the prompt you are saying, it is running the JVM internally. And the third thing is that Scala can talk to Java without any problems. So which means you can use all Java libraries without any cost. So these are like 3 selling points, but we don't need any of them today. But if you are using Scala at some point of time, go ahead and look at it. Okay, let us go to our content. We should have somewhere. Right. I'm opening in the IntelliJ, but you don't need an IntelliJ. You can open in any text file. Open the Scala examples. Okay. The first thing is that I want to show you the type inference. Now here 2 things you have to remember. Val means immutable. Var means mutable. Or if you use JavaScript, everyone knows var. Right. Here only the new thing is var, and we encourage in Scala to use var always. Go with immutability. Don't go with the mutable. And here you can see it always type infers. Here I don't think you have to give the data type. If you say 1, it infers like it is an integer. If you give 1.0, it infers like a double. If you give array of that, then it infers like array. You don't have to do anything. So what we do is that copy few of the lines from here and run it on the thing. Okay, all are able to see here. The way we declare variables in Scala is first the name of the variable, then the data type. So reverse of the C things. So here what it does, it knows that it is an integer. Now this is not dynamic typing. This is not like JavaScript. What we do is that let us reassign integer into something else. Integer equal to 2. No, not var. It says first of all you cannot do that because it is a var. It is immutable by default. Right? Even if you create var, let us say create var integer equal to 1. Now we can reuse the same names because I told you immutability is about value, not about the reference. So I can have that. Now let us say integer equal to something like string. See, you get an error. This is not dynamic typing. You got to be careful. This is better static typing. Which means once you know what is the data type, it should not change. And if you declare as a val, then it's immutable after value. Even if you declare it as a var, you can change the value, but you cannot change the data types. All are able to follow till here? All are able to type and get the things? And if you need any help, you can ask our guys, so they can help you. Okay, let us go back. Let us see how the collection works. I will take the least example. Control L. Okay, so this is your error list in Java. So here creating a list with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now one of the things you can see is that it interpreted like list of integers. Like Scala supports generics, but you don't have to declare yourself. It will interpret depending upon your whatever the data type you give. So it knows the list is numbers here. It says it's a list of integers. Again, same way with the variables, you cannot change the type of list. You cannot put a string in it. Similar to what Java has. Makes sense? So if you not know Java, you can ask questions in between. But again, Python, all those things. If you have generics, even C++ templates, they are same. So they are not good. Okay. Till here, I think everyone is happy. I shown you the type inference and I shown you the immutability. The 2 parts of our RDD concept. They come from Scala. Okay, let us go ahead. Next, one of the things about function-oriented programming is functions are first-class citizens in function-oriented programming. What I mean by here? Function can be passed into another function. Function can be written from another function. This is called as first-class citizens. That's why I told you JavaScript is the correct thing. Because if you ever written DOM code, you set a pass, you pass a function, correct? Now, how you define a function is very nice. You say define def, you name the function, and now if you here see, for a function, the parameters are not going to be type infer. The reason is that if you put a type inference, then you have a problem with the overloading. Correct? So if you have a different signature, then you have a problem. In functions, you have to declare explicitly. Here I am saying both A and B are same. And if you see that it is very concise, I can say equal to A plus B. The reason I use equal to is, in Scala, everything is expression. There is no statements at all. Everything has to return something. That's why we use equal to A plus B. Here it means that A plus B is the body of the function. Make sense? Okay, let us copy and run just to get feel that it's really going to run. Okay, it says, see, it is also a data type which is an int and int. I will show you in a minute. I can call this with add 1020. So the way you call is same. It's not going to be much different than our. All are able to see till here? Okay, this is very easy parts, but I just wanted to show. Let's go. Now, this is important. A function, since it is a first class thing, I can put it in a variable also. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I create a function variable. Now this is called as a kind of a way of writing, what do you call it? A syntax sugar to write a small function variables. Literal, sorry, yeah, it's called as function literals. So it is a functional literal. So in the left it is a parameters. This arrow says that, then there is a body. There is two ways. You can create def this thing, you can create like this also. Normally this one we use for places where we want to pass the function rather than declaring a normal function. Here I am creating a function variable because it's a var. Then I can use a function variable to call the function. This is something similar to function pointers in C, not completely. Okay. So you can run this. Yeah. So we don't have to call. I think everyone knows. Okay. I'm skipping few of the steps because if you already know, you can do it yourself. Okay, that's fine, right? Now we are getting into the important part. So this is the last part I want to talk. Now we have a collection. Now the question is how we transform collection in Scala. In Java, we have these for loops, right? We take a collection, we go through for loop using a advanced for loop or normal for loop, then we get a new collection. But in Scala, collections are immutable by default. You have to ask for a mutable if you want it. It's not the other way around like Java. So all the things what we get in Scala are immutable, even the collections. That's why in Scala we have transformations. Now transformation takes function as a parameter. So I will explain what are the things. So let us start with a list. Control L. Yeah, so we have a list. Let us go there. Now, map, take a map. So, we already seen the map, but I will just explain. Here it says that for every value in the list, for value add value plus 1. See here, we are not going to declare a variable, what is the data type of value, because it already knows it has to be integer. And this is we call as function passing, because map is a function on list, and we are passing another function to that map function. Are you able to follow? This is what is the difference.
This map is not a collection.
A map is not a collection. List is a collection. Map is a function on collection, and it can take another function to say what I have to map to. Are you able to see the things? Now one of the things why I am showing this is the same API in Spark. What they have done is that they have copied collections API of Scala to Spark. That's it. So which means if you know Scala collection, you know the Spark API. So simple. So we'll do some more just to give you an idea. So here we are doing like a line. Let us create a line. So it is a list of strings. Then we have a flat map. So what may be flat map? Flat map is a little bit different than map. Flat map says for every single value you can have multiple values. Then I will flatten it. So I will tell you what are the things we are doing here. So because this is very important thing. So I can have list of strings. So what is going to be my every value? A string. Now flat map says you can have multiple values. So how I can generate multiple values? Maybe I can say value dot split. Then what is going to give me? Split normally gives you array. Correct? Then what I get normally is if I do mapping, I get like this. Are you able to see it till here? I have to write somewhere up or something? Okay. So we write it. Where is the step? Okay. Because if you know flat map and map, or what good example is that? So first I have a list of strings. Then if I do a map, what is the type of the every value is a string, correct? Now in the flat map, what I do is that I do value dot split by some way. Maybe you can give anything. Then what I get if I just do a map? I think everyone is connected to Wi-Fi, right? Okay. Then what I get is list of list of strings, correct? Because every value now it's transformed into list, then we get a list of strings. Now the question is, can I do this just the list of strings? I want to remove this intermediate list. This is called as flattening, which means if you have a nested structure, this is a nested structure, making as a flat, we get a flattening. So again, it's in the big there is a flatten thing. In Scala, if you want to combine both mapping and flatting, then we will say flat map, which means do mapping first, then whatever the results you get, do flat on it. So flat means take a nested structure and make a normal structure. So after flattening, what happens is that you get these strings. So all these things will be in the only big list. Are you able to follow this? Because this is kind of a new API normally. I'm not sure. Does Python has flat map? I don't know. Okay. Now let us run this. We have another bracket. Now one more thing. Scala do not need semicolons. Very important feature. Right. So what happened is that though we had 2 lines, we should have got 2 more lines, right? But we got so many words because we got so many strings inside a map, then it got flattened, which means all the words from both the strings now they are in the same big list. Are you able to follow? This is called as flat map. Okay. I think I have to discuss 2 more, then we will go to RDBMS. In Scala, there is a new thing called tuple. How many of you heard tuple? Yeah, tuple means it's a heterogeneous collection. You can have a collection with a heterogeneous, and how we represent them is like these brackets. This is called as a tuple. So this is an example. Here, rather than returning the normal data type, I am returning a tuple. Here, tuple has 2 parts. The first part is the word. The next part is 1. So it is not a key value pair, not like a map or something. It's a tuple. Tuple means heterogeneous collection of data. Now, if you see RDBMS, actually in the RDBMS, row is called as tuple. I think if you go to like a DBMS theory, the DBMS row is called as tuple. The reason is that it is a heterogeneous collection of data. Okay? The last one I want to show, may not be this, so is the reduce function. So since you've done map reduce, I want to show both. Here reduce is nothing to do with key value pairs. Reduce means, is that you take a list and for every 2 pairs do a reduce. So reduce means take something big and get a single value. So what we do is that every time we send out new and new values, then they will be added over a time to give you the one value. This is how we make a sum in list. The reduce function, now don't confuse this reduce with Hadoop, because Hadoop reduce needs key value pairs. Okay, this reduce means take a lot of values, reduce into one thing. Now again it takes a function, correct? It takes a comma b, then a plus b means add all the numbers. Again this intermediate answers, it will keep track of. So it means adding first 2 numbers will get a new number, it will add to next, all those things it will do. All are able to follow? So I have shown you 3 important factors, or maybe 4. Immutability, type inference, collection, and these are called as combinators, collection combinators, map, flat map. This is all you need to know in Scala in order to use Spark. Yeah.
Can you explain reduce with an example?
Yeah, I will tell you. Yeah.
Series plus, it's okay.
Correct.
Put some other operator in the.
Yeah. So in the reduce, the function has to be commutative.
Yeah.
So that is the one of the things. So what happens is that if I take list 1, 2, 3, list equal to 1, 2, 4, 5, these are the steps of reduce. Reduce first will be 1, 2. So what is the 1 plus 2? 3. So reduce next step will be actually 3, 4. Since there is no 3 here, the first parameter will be the result of the previous thing. Now the thing is that you don't know which is, how you know it's the first one. That's why it has to be commutative. Which means even if it is second one, it should not matter. Which means in the reduce, you cannot do something which is changes the, if the change of order is there, you will get some other result. Makes sense? Are all able to follow? Since it may be the first or second, what happens? If it is commutative, then 4 plus 3 equal to 7, 3 plus 4 equal to 7. All are able to follow? Okay?
That means I cannot use the division operator in reduce.
Sorry?
That means I cannot use division operator or.
Yeah, you cannot use. Then you have to know, there is other operators for that. You cannot use the division because if the things changes, Yeah.
So there is a different fold, right?
Yeah, there's a fold. Yeah, fold left, fold right. So many things are there. I think I'm not written exactly, and that's much more complex. But there are some operators to do that. But everyone understood what is reduce, which means you already know MapReduce. But problem is Spark has more than 22 operators to work with. MapReduce are 2 of them. Right? Okay. Now with this idea, we have enough Scala knowledge to go with the Spark. I have like 15 minutes to go with. So let us go to Spark and do. The nice thing is that this is the same shell we are going to use for Spark also. So you don't have to spin up something new. I may have some issues to run with. I will look at because my IP address is changed. Maybe it's doing something nasty, but don't worry. We can run the transformation because they are lazy, right? When it's computation, it will have some problem. We'll see. Okay. Let us go to the Spark. Now, the first thing is that how to create an RDD. Once you have an RDD, it's a Scala API. So this is what you have to know, the Spark. Now there are mainly 2 ways to do it. You can take in-memory data structure and create RDD out of it, or you can take a file and create a RDD out of it. There are 2 things. Again, you can have an NoSQL, you can do a lot of things, but in this session we are going to have 2. So first thing is that the SC stands for Spark Context. So this context is the one which keeps track of configuration, schedulers, clusters and those kind of things. And that is the entry point to create an RDD. Once you have an RDD, you don't have to go to SC. But to create a new RDD, you have to go through the Spark context. Okay, here what we are doing? We are creating RDD from the lines. Now, you have to remember, everything is lazy. When you say make RDD, nothing happens. It says, what do you want? New RDD. Fine. To trigger anything in Spark, you have to run some of this, but not transformation, we call it as actions. One of the actions we are going to use extensively is collect. But don't write this in production because collect normally uses in memory and you may get out of memory errors. But collect, only I am going to use this so that it actually goes and reads the data from the list and does something. Since because of the laziness, somehow I have to show that there is actual data, I am triggering it. But in most of the Spark examples, don't try to run actions till you don't need it. Try to do transformations. Okay, let us run this example and see what happens. Because I wanted to show what is RDD. Yeah, control it. Oh, we have a problem. Okay, so you guys can go ahead. Give me 2 minutes. I'll just fix this one. Okay, now we are fine. So let us run that. I think if you are already run collect, you can see the same data. Right? We have not done anything with it. We just wanted to show that RDD has things. Yeah.
Collect change the type from list to array.
Yeah. So the collect returns array thing. Because actually internally it's not a list anymore. It's RDD. So list is the input source, but internally it is represented a little bit different.
So whenever you collect RDD, it becomes array.
Correct. But there is also ways to say collect as map or something. So you can do. Now here I want to show you where the idea of type inference comes along. RDD is type inferred. RDD is not something like abstract. There is a type on it, and by looking at the data, since it's a list of string, it automatically knows that it is a RDD of strings. Which means when you do any transformation, you are doing on strings, not like some random data type. How? It is not read the data yet because that is a lot of time. By looking at the data type of the list, it knows that it is a string. Then you do sc.makeRDD, that data type will be moved into RDD also. So RDD of string, how you get? Through this. Now this is all done for you. You don't have to give a key value pair data types like in MapReduce. It will look at the data structure and say this is the RDD for you. Make sense? Okay, let us run RDD collect. Actually here nothing happened, right? Till now. Collect triggers actual calculation, actual going to the list, reading or those kind of things. Now if you see so many something happened. This is lazy evaluation.
So this is in memory?
Sorry? No, this is not in memory. This is not. Data is there in memory, but it is nothing to do with caching. We'll see the caching later. Okay, say control here. We are getting back the array, so this is not fun. We'll see the example of file also, then we'll move on. Now, file is not too different. Rather than saying make RDD, just a text file. Okay, there are so many ways to do it, but one easiest way is text file. Now this read.md is there in your folder. That's why I'm giving the thing. Now since it can talk to HDFS, it can read from local file system, it can read from HDFS also. It is also transparent to you. You don't have to worry about it. Now, nothing happened actually. It not read the data. Then I can, if I say collect, control F. Now, this is what I say unification. You can create RDD from any source you like. Now this extends even in the Spark streaming. You can take a socket stream and create RDD out of it. Because RDD is an abstraction. It does not define where the data comes from. Make sense? Are you able to follow till here? How to create an RDD? Normally you go with the two APIs. Make RDD for your built-in thing, in-memory thing, and text file for the data. Now here text file can read from HDFS also. Okay? Say control here. Now we have to look at word count, right? Because word count is dominating hello world program of big data. Okay. Now, if you ever seen this word count, you will be so happy. Because if you seen the Hadoop word count, it used to take me like 3 hours just to explain word count. Because there is a long writable you have to explain. Then you have to explain why there are 3 class files, map file, reduce file, and then you have to explain what is the job configuration API means, what is the input format means, so many things. Here I don't need. I already explained you a flat map. I already explained you map. Only thing I have to explain is reduce by key. So reduce by key means this reduce function runs for each key. That's it. For each key it will come. So reduce means for everything. Reduce by key means it is for each key. Now only thing you have to remember is that this reduce by key operations are only for pairs. Now how it done? It is all done for you. It is type infer. It says that okay, word mapping is a pair RDD. That's why you get reduce by key. If you try to do reduce by key on words, you will get error because there is no key pair. Now you have to remember Spark is a superset of MapReduce, which means in MapReduce everything has to be key value pair. In here you don't have to. Make sense? All are able to follow? Okay, so this is example. I think everyone is able to follow. Flat maps gives you the words. For every word I say word comma 1. Then you say reduce by key. For each key combine the sum. Then finally you collect to get the results. Now you can ask where is the combiner? It runs combiner by itself. You don't have to do it. Where is input? Everything is done for you. RDD, you create RDD, you are happy. Everything is done for you. Okay. So this is word code example, 4 lines. And this is not a layer on top of Spark API, not like Pig or something. This is the API. Okay, so that's very important. Okay, so if you want, okay, let's run because if you run a word count, there's a legitimacy. Okay.
Can I create a pad with 3 elements?
Sorry?
Can I create a pad with 3 elements?
You can, but if you want to reduce by key, then you have to have a key value pair, which means one key has to be 1. Value can be any number of parameters. So it has to be 2 tuples. Sorry, 1 tuple with this nested thing. Yeah, you can have a tuple inside a tuple. you can have like word or anything, then 1, 5. So this is possible. This is still a pair, but inside a tuple you can have another tuple. So tuples can be nested. Okay, let us run, and if everyone is able to run, then we have done word count. Then maybe I will directly go to joins or something, so that we will finish it off. But I already told you, RDD and Scala collection API is done. And since all the APIs are same, almost Spark streaming is done. So when we have a next session, maybe we will do Spark streaming only half an hour. I just have to say what is the new concept like this team, then you have the same API, you are done. Right. Okay. Now we get, okay, I am not sure what should be the actual answer, but think that it is correct. If you are not sure, go to readmud.md and verify that it is really correct. But word count, you should get it right. If it is problem in word count, then you have a problem. Okay. So now, ultimately, I'll just explain one thing, so you can do yourself. Come last, in the last. Now, if you ever done joins in MapReduce, you know how hard it is. Reduce side join, map side join, distributed things join, so many joins. Here, there is only one kind of join, and the API is direct. You say, you create 2 RDDs, here I am creating 2 RDDs. One is customer RDD and sales RDD. You say, join them. Done. You get a join RDD. How it joins? Both has to be key value pair, and the same key should be there in both the places. So do join, one line, join. And there is again left join, right join, whatever you want you can do.
Outer joins are available.
Outer joins also available. That's all join. Simple? Yeah.
So what's the data type of the new join? Like if you cannot into primary data type?
So the join data type will be a tuple with this all the properties, like that combines both the tuples. The key will be there, and the value will be all the values in the first and second. So that's the data. Now, final question people ask, what is the caching means? Simple, any RDD you call cache, it will keep it in memory, and all the next transformation going to be run from memory. So what you have to do for caching? Nothing. Call just cache somewhere in between. When you want to say cache, it will keep it in memory. Then after that, all your transformations, executions will be done from memory.
This cache will return another
No,
RDD. Right?
it is just, so now the question. Now, cache will not return another thing. Why? Because internally, they change the location of the splits. So RDDS is just a split. Rather than pointing to HDFS, they have this global hash map saying which is cached, which is not cached. That's why this do not return a new RDD. This is the same RDD, just cached on memory, because it's transparent.
This is a mutable.
Yeah, it is an internal mutability. So they change the split pointers.
Suppose I run machine learning.
Yeah.
Do 100 iterations or whatever.
Correct.
Do I have to mention
Yeah,
cache?
actually, then caching is very important.
I have to mention it.
Yes, you have to mention. So the reason why it is not by default for performance reasons. You don't want to, if you don't have a lot of RAM, then you don't want caching. But normally, if we say, if there is a RDD which we use again and again, then normally we say cache. And if you want to share this RDD, there is something called Tachyon. You can share this cached RDD across multiple applications. Yeah, there was a question. Okay.
Yes, so till you call cache, it will be in the
Disk. So here cache means not read now. Cache means that when the next time you do computation, bring the data and keep it in memory, so that whenever I do next, like future computation, always come from memory. Okay? Yeah.
Like when we do persist RDD,
Correct.
can it be shared between multiple Spark applications or
Yeah.
we
So
should go with Tachyon?
yeah, you have to go with Tachyon. So by default in Spark, you cannot share RDD across Spark contexts. It is not. It will be never supported, I think. So the only solution is now is Tachyon. And RDD do have checkpointing and those kind of things. You can read that. So which means, see, I have given how much? There are like 10 APIs here. There are 20 more to learn. That completes your Spark. But because you know RDD is the underneath factor. So I think, I'm not sure what, maybe half an hour late. That completes my introduction to Spark session. So this is what I normally wanted people to have introduction, so that they know where they are coming from, why it is like the way. I think in the future session we will do streaming, we will do machine learning, all those things. But we don't have to spend too much time. If you already been into this session, you already know RDD. All the new libraries are the new APIs on top of this RDD. Underneath everything will be represented like RDD. Yeah. Okay, so good question. So the question is, what happens if I have a large data which now are going to fit in memory? By default, memory will fall back to disk. So if you are not able to cache, it will fall back to disk. So that setting is also there. But what you do is that you try to avoid it because of performance reasons. Don't spill on disk as much as possible. But if you don't have a RAM, it will spill on disk. Sorry?
Tuning in Spark.
Tuning. Yeah, so there is Spark, memory increase and those kind of things. So are you asking, can we do or how to do?
Yeah, how to do.
Okay, so that is a little bit bigger session. We can take it offline. We can talk about it. Yeah.
We are talking about more about memory. Then we can't say Spark will run on commodity handler.
No, so memory is an optimization. If you don't want it, you cannot have it. So if I drop the cache, everything is fine. So it is proven. The latest benchmark says Spark is faster than Hadoop even on disk by 10x. So if you do caching, it is 100x.
This distributed cluster, the memory is kind of floating as one view of the memory which is actually distributed.
No, it is all the memory. So actually what they do is that there is something called worker nodes in the container nodes. The container memory will be divided into 4 parts. One is your actual runnable program, one is heap for the program, one we call as a kind of say overhead for container, and one portion will be cache. I can say in the container use 30% for cache. Then 30% of the RAM in the worker node will be used for cache. So I can control by the configurations.
And the workflow to basically this which happens.
Yeah.
Or this content is more.
Correct.
How does it happen? Like
It is there are few caches like bounded memory cache. You can say LRUs or that's kind of there are few policies you can apply.
Those things are configurable.
These things are configurable. You can plug and play your own caching if you want. So even that kind of things are. Yeah.
Features will be covering parallelism.
Sorry.
Parallelism will be covering the features.
Okay. Yeah. So how to run on cluster? Right. Yeah. We will do. So now there are a lot of ideas people are having. So what we do is that maybe once everything is done, we will take all the ideas and we'll see what we want to do. Like there is a streaming, there is a machine learning, there is like a parallelism cluster, and we may have talk on Yarn or Mesos or those kind of things also. Yeah.
can we, your future session will run on say AWS?
Yeah. Okay. We can do it on AWS. There is one script to do that. So yeah. It's a Spark. So all the API you are showing is there in the Spark. Joins are not there in the Scala collection API. Okay, I think I should give time to these guys. Otherwise, they will say you told me that this is a session. You are not giving time. So what we do is that if there are more questions, I will be there for some more time here. After this session, we can. I think I'm not sure if you have flash talks, we can do flash talks. They will cover some use cases. So till now, I'm only given the technology point of view. They will give you the use case, like a real world point of view. And after that, if you have any questions, we can talk in offline. And also we'll collect some ideas for next few, maybe 4 or 5 sessions, maybe now only. Okay, thank you guys.